1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I think now you should be able to hear me, right? Yes? I think so. Okay, thank you. Okay, let's try that over again. Hello and welcome to everyone to Buddhist Insights Empty Cloud. I am Sanāthavihāri Bhikkhu, and today I'll be talking about Saddhā. Saddhā um, is usually translated as faith or conviction. And in this kind of secular modern world, faith seems to be like a dirty word or something to be ashamed of, right? Faith is associated in some circles with people who are not educated, foolish people, superstitious people, etc. Right? So there's this kind of negative bias that we have in the West towards faith. But if we look, throughout the world, even where I grew up, for some time in Mexico, faith is a very powerful thing. People are proud to be full of faith, even here in the U.S., certain people. And Africa, Asia, I would dare to say that more than, the majority of the world knows the power of faith. Yeah. But it's this kind of like a more modern or more kind of European kind of, influenced places where faith kind of seems to be, something that is looked down upon. But in the Dhamma, in the Arya Dhamma, in the Buddha Sasana, Saddha, faith is an important aspect. And I think actually, faith is, I haven't heard any Asian Buddhists have any problems with faith, really. It's always like the convert Buddhists, right? Convert Buddhists don't want to talk about its faith. They'll try to wiggle around it by saying, oh, it's trust or conviction, etc. But let's just be honest with ourselves, if the word faith rubs you the wrong way, then you need to look in your own mind and heart and see why that bothers you, why, you need to get over it, basically. There's nothing wrong with that word or that concept. It's some cultural kind of like, biases that you have because of the history of religion in the West. But, put that aside for the moment and try to think beyond your own cultural narrative in context and try to see it in the wider sense, and especially in the Buddhist sense, the importance of faith. So today I'm going to share with you some suttas about where the Buddha talks about the importance of faith. And that's what I'm going to do now. That's why you see me with my glasses on. I usually don't wear glasses, but today I have them on because I'm going to be doing some reading. Okay. So first, I wanted to start with this sutta called the Dudaya Punya Bisandhu Sanda Sutta from the Anguttara Nikaya, Book of Force, Sutta 52. It's translated as Streams of Merit. So once again, if you want to follow along, you can read at home at Anguttara Nikaya, Book of Force, Sutta 52, Streams of Merit. And what are these 4 streams of merit, right? That's what the sutta is based on. And it says bhikkhus, they are these 4 streams of merit, right? Of punya. Streams of wholesome nutriments of happiness, heavenly, ripening in happiness, conducive to heaven, that lead to what is wished for, desired, agreeable to one's welfare and happiness. What for, right? So what are these 4 streams? What are these 4 things, right, that are going to conduce not only to good karma, to punya karma, right? Not only to wholesomeness, not only to happiness, also to a good rebirth in heaven, right? They conduce to what is wished for, desired, agreeable for one's welfare and happiness. Okay, what is the first one? Here, a noble disciple possesses unwavering faith in the Buddha. Here says confidence, but I'm going to use faith just to be more provocative and keep your attention. Here, a noble disciple possesses unwavering faith in the Buddha. Thus, the Blessed One is an arahant, perfectly enlightened, accomplished in true knowledge and conduct, fortunate, knower of the world, unsurpassable trainer of persons to be tamed, teacher of devas and humans, the enlightened one, the blessed one. This is the first stream of merit, right? Iti piso bhagava araham samma sambuddho vidya charana sampanno sugeto lokavidu anuttero purisa dhamma sarati satta deva manusannam buddho bhagavati. Right? So having unwavering, unshakable faith in the Buddha is what? Is a stream for punyakama, meritorious actions. It's a stream for wholesomeness. Having faith in the Buddha brings happiness. Having faith in the Buddha brings rebirth in the heavenly place. Having faith in the Buddha leads to what is desired for, agreeable to one's own welfare and happiness, right? That is the power of having faith in the Buddha, right? And what does it mean to have faith in the Buddha? It means to recognize that there was a being in the past, right? Who was an arahant, who was perfectly awakened, right? Accomplished in true knowledge and conduct, right? Fortunate here means a lot of good karma, right? The most blessed one in good karma. Knower of the world, right? Knows things as they are, sees things as they are. Unsurpassed trainer of persons to be tamed. Teacher of devas, right? Of celestial beings and humans. The enlightened one, the blessed one. This is the first stream of merit, right? So the first way to achieve great merit, right, to help us achieve all the good things like happiness and a good rebirth and wellness, is to have faith, unwavering faith in the Buddha. That's how important faith is in Buddhism, Saddhā. The next one is, again, a noble disciple possesses unwavering faith in the Dhamma. Thus, svakato bhagavata dhammo sandittiko akaliko ehipasiko opanaiko pachatam veditabbo vinyuhiti. The Dhamma is well expounded by the Blessed One, directly visible, immediate, inviting one to come and see, applicable, to be personally experienced by the wise. This is the second stream of merit, right? So not only having faith in the Buddha, but having faith in the Dhamma. One who sees the Dhamma sees the Buddha, and one who sees the Buddha sees the Dhamma, right? So also, if you want to be happy, if you want to have a good rebirth, right? If you're looking for your own welfare and benefit, this is the way. To have unwavering, unshakable, unperturbable faith in the Dhamma, right? Wow. And to accumulate a lot of punyakama, a lot of wholesome merit, right? A lot of people in Buddhism like to make merit. This is one way you can make merit, by having unwavering faith in the Dhamma. The next one, I think everyone guessed that already, right? Again, a noble disciple possesses unwavering confidence in the Sangha. The Sangha of the Blessed One's disciples is practicing the good way, practicing the straight way, practicing the true way, practicing the proper way. That is the 4 pairs of persons, right? The 8 individuals. These are the different levels of awakening and those aspiring to those levels of awakening. This Sangha of the Blessed One's disciples is worthy of gifts, worthy of hospitality, worthy of offerings, worthy of reverential salutation, the unsurpassed field of merit for the world. This is the third stream of merit, right? So also having unshakable, unwavering, unperturbable faith in the Sangha, right, is a cause, is a stream, is a condition for great merit, for happiness, for your benefit, and for a good rebirth, a heavenly rebirth. Now the fourth one follows. Again, a noble disciple possesses the virtuous behavior loved by the noble ones, unbroken, flawless, embellished, unblotched, freeing, praised by the wise, ungrasped, leading to concentration. This is the fourth stream of merit. So it just follows naturally that if you have great faith in the Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha, that you're going to act in accordance with the Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha, which means you're going to practice the 5 precepts, which means that you're going to have very good behavior, right? Very good morality and ethics, both in speech, body, and mind. It naturally follows. So, sometimes some of us may struggle with keeping the precepts. So we try to force ourselves, right? Like force ourselves to do the precepts, control ourselves, control our desires, control our impulses. But another way to overcome these impulses, these desires, another way to be able to follow the precepts, instead of through aversion and control, is through letting go, right? And surrendering yourself to the Dhamma, to surrendering yourself to the Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha, and just filling yourself up with all this saddha, right? With all this positive energy. And in that way, you'll be able to practice those precepts not through control, but through great devotion. Great devotion. Devotion and faith will be what will guide you and help you keep the precepts, which is a way of keeping the precepts, which is very pleasant, right? Instead of from this like authoritarian control, hard place, right? Of trying to keep the precepts. Now you keep the precepts. Let's use a very kind of loose word, out of love, right? Out of kind of like out of this love for the Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha, you're keeping the precepts instead of like out of fear of punishment or like beating yourself up. The Buddha says these are the four streams of merit. Streams of wholesomeness, nutriments of happiness, heavenly ripening in happiness, conducive in heaven, leading to what is wished for, desirable, agreeable to one's welfare and happiness. When one has faith in the Tathagata, unshakable and well established, and virtuous behavior that is good, loved by the noble ones and praised, when one has confidence in the Sangha and one's view has been straightened out, they say that one is not poor. That one's life is not lived in vain, right? So if you have faith in the Buddha, if you have faith in the Dhamma and Sangha, if you have good behavior and right view, right? These are the main things. That person is not a poor person. That person is a rich person, right? A person who is protected by the heavenly abode, kind of like my name, Sanāthavihāri. A person who is not destitute, Sanata, and Vihari, dwelling in richness, right? So if you want to be a Sanāthavihāri, you can also practice in this way by having true faith in the Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha, having good behavior, and having right view. Therefore, an intelligent person remembering the Buddha's teachings should intend on faith and virtuous behavior, right? If you call yourself a Buddhist, if you want to follow the teachings of the Buddha, therefore, you should be intent on developing saddha, faith, right? And good behavior, virtuous behavior, confidence and vision of the Dhamma, right? These are the important factors for a person who wants to overflow in good merits. Wow, beautiful. All right. So I want to share with you a couple more suttas. I hope everyone is doing well and not dozing off. I know sometimes when we read suttas, it's kind of gets a little dull, but I'm trying to jump in here and there to keep it a little bit entertaining. Oh, some nice things over here. Let's see. Let's jump into the chat a little bit and let's see what's going on in the chat before we move on to the next sutta. A lot of hellos. People can hear me now. Thank you. Yes. That's the issue. ACT, accurate. I know have doubt that it would, with the Buddha, it would work. Oh, Namo Adi Dafat. Oh, to our friends in Vietnam. Hello. Xin chào. Okay, hope right. Faith is carrying an umbrella. Oh, that's a nice analogy, right? A nice metaphor for faith is like carrying an umbrella with you. Faith in the Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha as our example for true awakening is way different from what it used in the Christian view with faith, which includes the expectation of non-questioning. Very true, yeah, right? There's a difference between having faith and like blind faith, or just like submitting yourself to others, right? Like, I'm not going to think about anything. I'm just going to do whatever someone else wants me to do, right? Kind of like relinquishing your will. Maybe not physically, but at least intellectually, right? Like, I'm not going to question anything. I'm not going to think about anything. I'm just going to do what I'm told to do. So yes, in that aspect, I think there is a big difference in the way that faith is applied, or what's the container for the faith, right? We have this faith is like a motivation and intention, but what are like the structures, right? And what is the narrative behind how faith is held within different traditions, And I think you pointed out a possible difference between how it's held in Buddhism. No. SD says, doesn't faith imply that there's no? Because I have faith in you, SD. I have faith in you that you're a very intelligent person and that you're trying your best to be a good person. Because I have faith in you, does that mean that there needs to be a God? No. So a lot of our terminology is very limited by our cultural context, and we need to be able to step out of our ethnocentrism. That's like the anthropological term for it. When one views everything through the lens of their own cultural upbringing or the main narrative in the culture. So sometimes we have to really look at the word and separate it, right, from the cultural context that it's held in, and just see what the word means on its own. Okay. So now I want to share with you another sutta. It's from the Anguttara Nikaya, Book of Threes, Sutta 42. So you're going to see I'm going to be using a lot of Anguttara Nikaya. It's very easy because Anguttara Nikaya is just like lists, so it's very easy to pick stuff from here, and it makes my job very easy. So if you want to follow along at home, you can look up Anguttara Nikaya, Book of Threes, Sutta 42, called Cases, Titana Sutta. And here it says, bhikkhus, in three cases, one may be understood to have faith and confidence, right? In these three cases. What three? When one desires to see those virtuous behavior, right? So to have Saddhā means to have this desire to see those who behave well, properly behave, right? Morally upright people. When one desires to hear the good Dhamma, very obvious, self-explanatory. And when one dwells at home with a mind devoid of the stains of miserliness, right? Of stinginess. When you get rid of stinginess, that's another way you have faith and confidence. Freely generous, open-handed, delighting and relinquishing, devoted to charity, to dana, delighting in giving and sharing. In these three cases, one may be understood to have faith and confidence, right? One who desires to see the virtuous ones, right? The well-behaved ones, we can say. One who wishes to hear the good Dhamma. One who has removed the stains of greediness or stinginess, right? Miserliness, is called a person endowed with faith. So what does it mean to be a person of faith here, right? It's very different. I'm so happy that you asked the question earlier about God and the other person who asked the question about the difference between Christianity. Here it says a person of faith is a person who what? Desires to see properly behaved people, right? People who are not harming others, people who are living the holy life. That is one requirement of a faithful person. The other one is one who wants to hear the Dhamma. That just means hear the truth. Hear the truth of how things arise and cease, right? And one who has removed their greediness, their stinginess, their miserliness, right? That is a person of faith. So in Buddhism, if you want to consider yourself a person of faith, you're not a person who is greedy, miserly, or stingy. You're a person who wants to hear the truth, the Dhamma, and you're a person who desires to be around people who behave properly, who have proper behavior. This is the definition that the Buddha gives in this sutta of a person of faith, a person of Saddhā, which is very different from other places, right? And as we looked in the other sutta, the benefits to being a person of faith is that you will get a good rebirth, you will find wellness and happiness and have a lot of good merit, right? So we're starting to see this picture, right? This constellation of qualities that help us understand how faith is understood and how faith is practiced within the Buddhist perspective. Now I want to share with you another sutta from the, again, Anguttara Nikaya, Book of Threes, Sutta 48, called Pabbataraja Sutta, called The Mountains in English. And here it says, bhikkhus, based on the Himalayas, the king of mountains, great salt trees grow in three ways. What three? They grow in branches, leaves, and foliage. They grow in bark and stouts, and they grow in softwood and heartwood. Based on the Himalayas, the king of the mountains, great salt trees grow in these three ways, right? So it's describing the three different aspects or three different dimensions of these salt trees, right? Like, why are they so great? What's amazing about these trees? So now we're going to get like a simile, right? For how this relates to faith. So too, when the head of a family is endowed with faith, the people in the family who depend on him grow in three ways. What three? They grow in faith, Saddha. They grow in virtuous behavior, good behavior, right? And they grow in wisdom, Pañña. When the head of a family is endowed with faith, the people in the family who depend on him grow in these three ways. Just as the just as the trees that grow in dependence on a rocky mountain in a vast forest wilderness might become great woodland lords, so when the head of a family here possesses faith and virtue, his wife, children, and relatives all grow in dependence upon him. So too his friends and his family circle and those depend on him. Those possessed of discernment, seeing the virtuous man's good conduct, his generosity and good deeds, emulate his example. Having lived here in accordance with Dhamma, the path leading to a good destination, those who desire sensual pleasures rejoice, delighting in the Deva world, right? So not only is there benefits for you to be a person of faith, but if you want to bring great benefit and wellness and happiness and a good rebirth to the people that you love, your family members and your friends, then you should be a person of unwavering faith, right? A person of unwavering faith brings three things to their family, right? To their friends. One, you help them grow in faith, right? And by helping them grow in faith, you help them grow in good behavior, sila, the precepts. And by helping them have faith in the Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha, which is going to motivate them to practice the Dhamma, and have good behavior, which is going to create a wholesome mind for it to be easier for them to see reality, right? Because the mind needs to be calm, the mind needs to be clear in order to properly see how things arise and cease. Then grows the wisdom, right? So a person of faith is actually helps a family and their friends and family and their loved ones grow in more faith, grow in good behavior, and grow in wisdom, right? And then over here in the nice, I'll repeat this nice little verses that it says in the sutta. Where was it? Those possessed in faith and virtue, his wife and children and relatives all grow in dependence upon him. So too his friends, his family circle, and those on dependence on him. Those possessed of discernment, seeing that virtuous, good conduct, his generosity and good deeds, emulate his example, right? So a person of faith is going to be a person who goes to refuge to the Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha. Therefore, your loved ones will emulate that. A person of faith will be a person of good behavior, and they're going to emulate that too, right? And a person of faith is going to be a very generous, charitable person. And the people around you are also going to follow your example in that. So if you want to be able to establish your family and your loved ones and your friends in wholesomeness, in proper behavior, in wisdom, then one needs to embody that and people will follow you, right? We need to set the example. So a good way to set the example is by developing your saddha, by developing your faith. And I've seen this happen for in my own experience. So within the Thai community, within the Bangladeshi community, within the Sri Lankan community, I see the mothers and grandmothers at times, right? Like get the little kids in the morning, wake them up and tell them to do the chanting and take the precepts, or offer some food to the Buddha, or do a little bit of chanting or meditation before they take the kids to school. And so they're establishing those kids in great wisdom and faith in the Buddha, confidence in the Buddha. Not only that, but they bring them to Dhamma school, they bring them to the temple, they do all these things, right, to help establish those kids in saddha, in faith, because it's going to be for their long-term benefit. It's going to keep them from doing unwholesome deeds. It's going to keep them from being greedy and miserly and stingy, and develop a mind of charity and giving, right? So you can imagine if you grow up and you see your parents always like coming to the temple and doing selfless actions and feeding the monks and supporting the temple and supporting the community. I mean, these Buddhist communities are very good as a source of support, community support, and resilience when difficult things happen. I've seen the community come together and support each other. And then that's going to, help the younger generation see, wow, there is something to this Buddhism, right? Like there is some wholesome qualities here that will be for my benefit. And I mean, when they're teenagers, they're going to rebel against anything. It doesn't matter, So, but when they're little children, you're going to be showing them the benefits of having faith. And later, once they finish college, right? Once they kind of settle down and they have a little bit more maturity, they'll look back and be like, oh, wow, that's amazing. Because I remember doing that. Like, that's been a lot of my experience since I became a monk. Looking back at my Catholic upbringing and all the good, virtuous qualities that were shared with me as a child, right? Um, Going through my uh, first communion and going to church and seeing my grandma wake up every morning and pray every morning her rosary. And before she went to bed, she would pray in her rosary. And when we'd go to these great, like, um, cathedrals in Mexico, we would like crawl on our knees and all these acts of devotion, all these pilgrimages that my family would go on, walking from one town to another, doing all these amazing acts of faith and helping each other, and how faith would bring everyone together, especially for Christmas. And yeah, like, I didn't really much understand that as a child. And then as a teenager, I kind of thought it was dumb. But then as I got older, I began to see, like, what was the intention behind it? What was trying to be communicated with me? And now I get it. Now I'm like, oh, of course, now I understand. But it just takes some time. So I truly, really appreciate seeing my grandma be such a person full of so much faith to her last days. She was a person of great faith um, in her religion. And how the faith actually was like this critical cornerstone for our community, for our family, that held us together during difficult times and promoted selflessness, right? So it just, faith is just such a beautiful quality. And today I wanted to take the time to promote faith. And for you to help, for Buddhist people in the West, for convert Buddhists, to be able to have a different relationship with faith and not see it from your own cultural, ethnocentric lens, and try to see it from the Buddhist lens, from the Asian lens, from the, person of color, from a brown person, an Indian person's perspective, instead of seeing it from our own kind of like, you know, uh, positionality that we have in our current state in this life. So now I'm going to go through the chat. I'm pretty sure there's going to be some questions in here, and we'll go through them. Okay. Faith. Okay. I already answered those. Blind faith is so damaging. We don't need more religious people, including Buddhists, in the world. We just need those religious people to live by their faith. I think being closed-minded in anything is very unskillful, right? If you're dogmatically holding any view, philosophical, political, religious, it's just going to bring you in conflict with others, because most likely other people are not going to agree with you. They have their own views of the world. So you're just setting yourself up for a situation where you're going to come in conflict with others and create hostility and aggression and at times violence, right? And hate in your heart and mind. So yes, if you have this kind of very dogmatic, closed off, sectarian view, whether it's religious, political, or philosophical, it's just going to cause damage. It's just going to cause damage. So faith is not something that closes us off to other points of views in other people or other religions. Faith is something that takes us deeper into our connection with whatever we're looking towards, the Buddha, Jesus, Krishna, whatever. Faith is a factor that connects. It's not supposed to be something that separates. It's something that brings us together, that unifies. So if you see that your faith is causing divisions, then you may want to reevaluate, your ideas of faith and how you're practicing it, because it's something that's supposed to bring people together, conduce to happiness, right? It's said to welfare, to a heavenly state, to meritorious actions. And if it's not leading towards those things, there's a problem with your faith. Buddhism is teaching me how to do what religions told me. Even though the Buddha was really just the first psychologist, well, I wouldn't agree with that. Just saying the Buddha was like just a psychologist or the first psychologist, studying the mind, the body, suffering, and the end of suffering. Yeah, that's another kind of Western perspective, right? Psychologist is a very new idea. So again, I would like to invite you, Spook, to put aside ethnocentric tendencies, cultural biases. And the bias is not necessarily a negative thing. It just means like a certain way of looking at things, right? This is the way I look at things. And let's try to practice epoke. Epoke means bracketing off. Let's bracket off what we learn throughout our life. Let's put it aside for the moment. And let's listen to the words of the Buddha. Let's read the suttas and let's see how the Buddha, how the suttas are communicating these concepts, these ideas to us, right? And it might surprise us that a lot of these kind of preconceptions that we had of what certain things mean might mean completely different things in Buddhism, or just in general. It might just have a completely different meaning in general. So when we read the suttas, let's come at the suttas with an open mind, and let's put aside our current views of like the Buddha as a great philosopher, the Buddha as a great psychologist, the Buddha as the first humanistic whatever, or a pragmatist, or the Buddha as a social revolutionary. These are our own things. These are our own idiosyncrasies. And I mean, they help us kind of like, they create these bridges, these vehicles to help us get closer to the Buddha. But it's not exactly, what the Buddha is or what the Dhamma is. So it's useful to use these tools as bridges and vehicles to get there. But once we get there, we have to throw them aside, right? And kind of envision the Dhamma as it's shared with us, instead of us imposing our own kind of preconceptions on it. Manal, Bhante, it is very important for lay practitioners to rely on teachers in order to then cultivate deeper faith in the Dhamma. How important has it been for you? Very important. Very, very important. We need, to be honest, to have faith, you need to have people of example, right? So you need to be surrounded by people who are practicing the Dhamma in the proper way. You're not going to have faith if the Buddhist people, whether lay or monastic, are misbehaving, right? If they don't know the teachings of the Buddha, if they're not practicing in the proper way, if they're involved in all these scandals or, fame, etc., you're not going to get that. So what you want to do to increase your faith in the Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha is to be surrounded by people who are practicing in the proper way, people who are behaving properly, people who know the words of the Buddha, right? People who are practicing generosity, people who are kind and compassionate. I mean, if you see people acting in this way, you're going to go, wow, that's such an amazing person, because everyone out in society is like out there in a dog eat dog world, only looking out for themselves. Everyone out there is just living this kind of hedonistic lifestyle, and everyone's just going according to their own view, their own point of view. But look, there are these people who are behaving properly, who are not, just letting their lives be driven by possessions and sensual experiences. They're behaving properly. They understand the teachings of the Buddha, and they're promoting and practicing generosity and kindness. Wow, that's amazing. That's going to make you very faithful. There is hope, right? It's going to make you hopeful. And that hopefulness is going to motivate you to practice the Dhamma and keep in line with Dhamma. So yes, Manal, it's important not only to find proper teachers, but to have good friends, kalyanamitas, to surround yourself with a community who is keeping up with these kind of basic fundamental practices of the Dhamma. Yes, and the thing about trust is you don't have to trust someone 100%. Trust is earned. So when you first meet someone, maybe you give them 5% trust, right? Benefit of the doubt. Maybe 5% of the things they're saying are right. And then maybe after some time, you give them 50% of your trust, right? And then maybe after a couple of years, you give them 80% of your trust, right? So you don't have to trust someone doesn't mean you trust someone 100%. We fall into this false dichotomy of kind of like we were talking about earlier, blind faith. Like you don't have to have 100% faith in the beginning, right? You need to read what the Buddha said, associate with Buddhist people, associate with Buddhist monks, and then you'll get to see if they're worthy of your faith, of your devotion and your trust, right? So trust and faith, devotion, conviction is something that's earned over time. It's not just like all or nothing. So let's not fall in, this is another Western tendency, right? Like either You 100% believe in God or you don't, right? Or you have 100% faith in God or you don't. Let's avoid this black and white dichotomous thinking way of approaching things, and let's gradual, right? The gradual path. Let's understand that faith grows gradually, confidence and trust grow gradually, and we give our trust to people in the beginning very conditionally, right? For our own safety, little by little, and then we begin to trust our teachers more and more and more. So this is very important because there's these whole guru kind of perspective that people have with like Eastern religions, right? Like you have to completely give yourself to your teacher or the monastic or the priest or your whatever they call them in whatever tradition you're following. But that's not true. You shouldn't do that right away. You have to analyze them. Even the Buddha says that you need to analyze a teacher and you need to watch their behavior, right? And see how they properly behave. And then in the suttas, I think it says 6 months. At least do it for 6 months, and then you can put some trust in them, right? So it's also very important, buyer beware. We need to be very careful who we give our trust to, because we can be easily exploited. I mean, there's so many things going on in the internet, master classes and all these kind of spiritual programs where you too, for only $2,000 or $1,000, can become enlightened, right? Or get this special thing if you give us the money. So we need to be very careful in this spiritual field, who we put our trust in. Even in monastics, right? Be very careful who you trust, and trust is earned. So the more you see that person behave properly, being generous, properly practicing a way according to Dhamma, and sharing their knowledge of Dhamma and their teachings of the Buddha, your trust grows little by little. Okay, some more thoughts from Spoke Waters on selflessness and his graduate study school. Spook says the Buddha originally said, however, as he was dying, let the teachings be your teacher, not worship. No, it doesn't say not worship. uh, they asked the Buddha, well, who will be in charge, right? Who will be our teacher now that you're gone? He said, let the Dhamma be your teacher. That's because the Buddha's not there. But the Buddha did give teachers. Like every monk has two teachers. It's called their acharya and their upajayo. So in order to become a monk, you need to have these two. If you don't have these two, you cannot become a monk. And one of them is a teacher, right? So there is very much a place for teachers in the Sangha, right? And the relationship between monks and lay people is not necessarily one of a teacher in the way that we think about it, but it's just someone who has more experience, right? Someone who's dedicated their life to the practice and who has a lot of experience and shares that experience with you. Because actually the relationship between a monk and a layperson is a relationship of kalyanamitas, right? Spiritual friendship. It's not a hierarchical relationship that we see nowadays. When we look at the text, the relationship between monks and lay people is of kalyanamitas. A good kalyanamita is like we would nowadays call a spiritual teacher. That's who your kalyanamita is, right? So it's very interesting how our ideas of teacher or what a spiritual teacher or spiritual mentor means to us now, and how it was held back there during the time of the Buddha. Because the Buddha did say, I mean, right there in that same sutta where the Buddha said, let the teachings, right, be your teacher. They built a great stupa for him, and the Buddha agrees to build the stupa for the Buddha and to do this great worshiping thing, right? After he passes away, there's the whole story of how he was worshipped. I mean, worship was there, and people used to bow to the Buddha all the time and bow to the monks. That is worship. So worship just means this, worth. It comes from worth, right? Worthiness, right? So to worship is just to recognize the worthiness of that person. That's all worship means. You recognize the worthiness of that person. Okay, Manal, thank you. SD, that's we're talking about Saddhā today, but you can bring that question, SD, for Monk Chat on Friday, and we'll talk about that. We'll answer that question about on Monk Chat. Because Monk Chat is the place where we just talk about any random things. You can ask any question. But today we're focusing on Saddhā. Oh, thank you so much. Let it go, let it be. Thank you so much. Ronald Tan, Namo Amitabha. Oh, a lot of praise to Amitabha Buddha, right? Today, Amitayas Buddha. We have a lot of followers of Buddha, Amitabha in the chat today. So nice to see you all here today. Any other questions about Saddhā? I'll give it a minute or so for you to type in your question. I mean, any question about faith, conviction, trust. Monk Chat is at 7:30 p.m. on Fridays. Every Friday, we have Monk Chat, and you'll have a panel of at least 2 monks that come up here, and you can ask anything. You can ask us, Bhante, why do you wear that robe? Bhante, what is rebirth? Or Bhante, like, why do you have to go on alms rounds? Or how is it to be a monk and be separated from your family as a Westerner? Now you don't get to visit your mom that often, and you don't get to see your family. All these types of questions are perfect questions for Monk Chat. Or about your meditation too, right? Meditation questions for Monk Chat. Monk Chat is basically open to anything remotely near to like Buddhist practice. That's the time you can ask almost anything. Oh yeah, I didn't answer the Upajayo. Right? Yeah. So the Acharya is your teacher, and your Upajayo means the person who ordained you. Right? So the person who helps you get your ordination, right? And gives you your ordination is your Upajayo. The person who ordained you is your Upajayo. And then the person who's going to train you to be a monk is your Acharya. So every monk has an Upajayo and an Acharya. No worries, Luisa. Yeah. Tan says, what about Kalama Sutta? Yeah, Kalama Sutta is awesome because it's going to my point that we don't have to trust something 100%, right? Let's not confuse what the Buddha says in the Kalama Sutta. He doesn't say we throw away all these categories, right? He says, but you don't follow them blindly, right? So he says, don't go by tradition, don't go by like word of mouth or if someone's popular, but only after properly analyzing it, right? So we have to analyze everything. And after analyzing it, if we see it's good for us, good for others, promotes intelligence, is not censored by the wise, then we take it, okay, there's some truth here, and we investigate more and we do it. But Kalama Sutta doesn't mean we go by whatever we want to go by, and we just kind of like, we don't trust anything, we don't have any faith. That's not what it's saying. But it's saying that you don't start off in the beginning by giving 100% trust or conviction in something that you know nothing about. Like, you don't know anything about this. Why are you trusting it? Like, you need to investigate it, right? So it's more about like teaching us how to properly grow in our conviction and faith and trust in people, in a system, in a community, and see if it's really giving the results that they're teaching, right? Like, is this teaching really giving us the results that I want, which is good for me, good for others, promotes intelligence, is not censored by the wise, and leads towards Nibbana. So Kalama Sutta is also another sutta that is very much cherry-picked by Western people in modern times, and they focus on the first part. But if you read the rest of the Kalama Sutta, you're going to see a very different perspective, especially near the end where there's some talk about, like, I think either the Devas or rebirth. I can't remember the end. So there's some stuff there, like some more supernatural things that are going on, even within the Kalama Sutta itself, right? So it's very important that we go back and try to reread the Kalama Sutta completely and try to see, within which context is this being shared. The context is very important. So we need to step out of our own context and place ourselves within the context of the teaching. Once again, as I was saying earlier, it's a very useful tool. I mean, that's what anthropologists try to do, right? When an anthropologist is doing an ethnography of a certain group of people, they don't judge the people based on the own anthropologist's own culture. They try to understand the culture from their own perspective. That's what makes a good anthropologist when they do an ethnography, right? So we kind of have to be like these kind of spiritual anthropologists. And when we read the suttas, we need to try to take the position of the people within that, in those suttas, and step out of our own point of view to do a proper analysis, a proper ethnography. Yeah, Monk Chat is Fridays at 7:30 p.m. Eastern time only on Fridays. On Wednesdays and Thursdays, we have other teachers giving teachings. Dharma Learner, good morning, Bhante. Just a comment to say I saw you write up in a Tricycle magazine from a while ago last night. Actually helps build a feeling of faith. When we learn, we are all very similar in samsara. Thank you. Oh, thank you, Dharma Learner. Tinudi, hello Tinudi. Hello Bhante, this is really insightful. My parents exposed me to Dhamma school and chanting before going to school, which is a reason on how I've come to see the great results of. Yes, I always see that Sri Lankan moms and achis, teaching the kids right before early in the morning before they go to school. They'll do their little chants. Also Bangladeshi kids, I see that too a lot within the more like South Asian Buddhists is a big part I've seen. Yes, okay, everyone. That's it for today. And remember, if you want to create a lot of good karma, if you want to be happy, if you're looking out for your own welfare and the welfare of others, if you want to have a good rebirth, if you want to be a good example for those in your family, if you want to have good behavior, right? If you want to grow in wisdom, then Saddha is the way. Saddha, Sila, Bhavana. These are the three trainings, right? Saddha, training in faith. Sila, training in restraint, in behavior. And Bhavana, training in meditation, cultivating the mind, developing the mind. Or, I didn't really say it today, but this is my plan until I leave on the 20th. I'm going to talk about the five pañcindriyāni, the five faculties. First one starting with Saddha. So today we touched on the first spiritual faculty of Saddha, of faith. And as you see me from now until I leave, I'm going to go through all the five different spiritual faculties. So until we see, I'm gonna be here on Monk Chat. So until Friday, may you be well, may you be happy, may you be comfortable, may you be peaceful. Sukhi Hotu. See you soon. Bye bye, everyone. Have a good day, good evening, good night, wherever you may be.